wonderful to see a great level of engagement and networking happening. And I'm sure you want to do much more of that, but now we have something very exciting coming up. So as we move ahead with this insightful day, it is now time to hear the global employee experience expert, Jason Averbook. Jason is a global keynote speaker, industry analyst, co-founder, and CEO of LeapGen. He has launched his book, The Ultimate Guide to a Digital Workforce Experience, Leap for a Purpose. He has more than 20 years of experience in the HR and technology industry, working with leading companies around the world to help them transform their HR organizations into strategic partners. Please welcome him with a big round of applause as he takes us through the immersive learning workshop on designing a foolproof employee experience strategy. Welcome, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. The frame is all yours now.
Great. Thank you so much, Yasmin, and thank you so much for having me. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone joining. I'm joining live from Los Angeles, California. So it's about 10:45 in the evening here, but great to be with you guys. Let's see, we have quite a few people on, so I would love it if you go to your chat window and just say hi. Just say hi, just so that I know that someone's here. I'll go ahead and say hi first. Maybe we'll get things started. And then we'll, Yasmin will look and see if others are in the chat. So if you guys go to the chat and you say, you know, where it says to, go to all panelists and attendees, you should be able to go ahead. And I see some people raising their hands, but they're not, it looks like everyone's raising their hands, which is good. They're not using the chat, so maybe.
Jason, I think chat is disabled, so you'll probably have to ask them to say hi in the Q&A section.
Ah, okay. Well, chat's disabled. That's too bad. Okay, well, at least they raised their hand, so we know that we know that they're here.
Yeah. They're all saying hi to you in the Q&A section. You can click on the Q&A section and see.
Oh, good. Well, thank goodness they're saying hi. So that's something. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for saying hi. So really excited to be here. You know, as I said, as was introduced by Yasmin, my name is Jason Averbook. You see my name there. I would invite all of you to, as part of this, follow me on LinkedIn as part of the process. All I do is put out content around the same topic. So if this concept of experience and workforce experience is interesting to you, please go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. I would be humbled to have that and appreciate. I can't put a link up because you guys don't have access to the chat, but you know, we'll be able to, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, we'll be able to make sure that you both receive a copy of this presentation as well as be able to continue the conversation. So we look at the organization that I represent, LeapGen. We're an organization that focuses strictly on helping organizations create this concept of a workforce experience or a digital experience. And when we think about the concept of experience, you know, we're going to talk a lot today about how it's changed, you know, in the COVID era that we live and what organizations are going to have to do to think about it going forward. The other thing that's really important about the work that we do, and I hope that this is relevant to the world that you're all living in today, you know, as I present around the world virtually or remote distributed like we are today, is that, you know, we've all of a sudden shifted from a world where we were focusing on the future of work to it's turned into the now of work. We focused on building things that we were going to build over 5 to 10 years. And we've had to build them over 5 to 10 weeks. You know, and because of that, there's just been a massive adjustment that's had to occur. And we're going to talk about that throughout as well. But as you see on the bottom of the screen here, focus on the now. Focus on the now, not the future. The future is now. And it's a key thing to keep in mind as we go forward. So we're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about reprioritizing. About 5 weeks ago, I put out 10 guideposts for the new world of HR that are really important as we reprioritize in 2020. Today, I'm going to talk through 5 of them in detail. I'm going to talk through 5 of them in detail because they really focus on experience. I'll introduce all of them to you, but we're talking about 5 in detail and talk about how now is our time. And then leave a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. To be able to answer some specific questions that you all have. So what do we do what do we do as HR professionals, as HR technology professionals? We do these things. We're constantly assessing, we're constantly then aligning, and we're constantly acting. Assess, align, act. Assess, align, act. Assess, align, act. Sometimes we act without doing some of the assessing and the aligning. We're going to talk about why that's important here in a few minutes, but really important to think about this concept of assess, align, act. And this is a framework. This is a framework. The reason we call this a workshop is I'm going to be giving you lots of frameworks that you can use, that you can actually take back and use going forward. I saw Rajesh just said hi in the chat. So maybe the chat's now enabled, but hi Rajesh, how are you? The other thing that we do is focus on, and Ritu also, the other thing that we focus on, that we do, is focus on strategy, deploy, and sustain. Now I see people chatting away. Strategy, deploy, and sustain. And when we think about sustain, the sustain is the ROI. That's where the value comes into play. So we build strategies, we deploy those strategies. And that's more than implementing technology. I can't stress that enough. We deploy strategies, and then we look and how do we think about how do we run, optimize, and innovate? Or that's where the ROI comes from, or the value comes from. So those are two frameworks for you to take away and use. And then this one, and if I could, I would love to just tattoo this on your body somewhere, you know, maybe in henna, because it changes, but it's so important. When we think about the world of experience and we think about what, if there's one thing I'd ask you guys to take away from this workshop, is this: when in the world that we live in today, there's 4 components that will make up our success. 4 key things that will make up our success. And every single HR organization has to master these 4 things. The first thing is making sure that we have a mindset and a vision as to what we're trying to achieve. And I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes, but that making sure that mindset and that vision is aligned and it's coordinated. Second of all, making sure that I design for my intended audience. Design for my intended audience. So my intended audience is not the HR function any longer. My intended audience is the employee, the manager, and the leader. Third, realize that employees, managers, and leaders work through journeys, not in processes. We design processes for ourselves. We design processes to get data, but employees, managers, and leaders work through journeys, and experience is measured through journeys, not processes. And then lastly, if I have all of those things, mindset, vision, people, audience, process, journey, then I can make the technology successful. But if I just start with technology alone, my chance of success is about 10%. Now, you're going to go live, but that's not success. Okay? When we think about our mindset, what are our measures of success? How are we going to measure success? And in the world of experience, our measures of success are different than what they were when we're just putting in a piece of technology for ourselves and let's just go live. If we could just go live, everything would be great. That's not our measure of success anymore. And that's what we're going to talk a little about here. So I hope this makes sense. If I see the chat's working, so I get a chance to ask you again. Type yes or no in the chat as to whether this makes sense. You may not agree with the numbers. The numbers are a little vary, and they'll vary by people. But overall, this is so important. And I tell people all the time, if you ever want me to deliver this presentation to your leadership team, I will do it all day long, all night long, for free. Okay, because if you don't get this right, you won't get anything else right. The question just came in, how did you arrive at these percentages? These percentages are based on how much resource goes in, not money, but resource and time goes in to actually getting these things done. The technology implementation alone, just the implementation, the flipping of the switches and the coding, that's about 10 to 15%, depending on the org. the making sure the leadership team's aligned, making sure I've done my persona and journey work, making sure I understand how I want my experiences to feel, that is where a majority of the work comes into play. Yet most HR organizations struggle and are not ready for it. So I mentioned to you that we were putting out these guideposts. I put out these guideposts about 5 weeks ago. Rachita, I love your question, and we're going to get to that question at the end. But I put out these guideposts about 5 weeks ago in the new world of work, which we call the now of work. The ones in orange are the ones I'm going to drill in deep today, but I really want to just quickly mention the others. First, how do I make sure that I have an aligned mindset and a coordinated mindset? And Rachita, that is one of the key components of the question you just asked, is how do we get leadership aligned? Is to make sure that they realize that we can't work in the same operating model, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Managers and leaders play a bigger role than ever in the new now of work. People data, like get rid of in our mind the concept of HR analytics. Really think about people data. Stop counting people, but making people count. So important in the world we live today. How do we revise our roadmaps? There's no one that's in 2020 right now that planned on 2020. If you had a roadmap going into 2020, if you're still working on that roadmap, you're doing something wrong. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And then lastly, it's how do we all make this our role? It's a magical time for all of us in this space. Some of you may not feel that way, but it's a magical time for all of us in this space. It's the most important time ever for us in this space. So what we want to answer is we want to answer this question in this workshop. What's our now and what's our next? So what's our now and what's our next? And when we think about that, we have to ask ourselves this question. It's 2020 outside of work. What year is it inside your company? What year does it feel like inside your company? So today, if I want to get something done outside of work, it's 2020. No one can argue with that. If I want to get something done inside the company, what year does it feel like? And just go ahead and put it in the chat. What year does it feel like? Does it feel like 2020? So they're the same. Does it feel like 2005? Does it feel like 2010? If I do a search, does it find exactly what I'm looking for? If I want to go ahead and complete a transaction, is it as easy as it is outside of work? When you think about these things, it's fascinating, because what's happened is most organizations would tell you it was about 2010 to 2015. Yet some people are saying 2010, 2012. In the last 10 weeks, people have said it's 2020. So mindset's 2010, but technology is 2050. In the last 60 days, we've caught up for the last 4 years. So it's you guys are making my point. It's 2020 outside of work. Now we're all of a sudden expected to think like it's 2020 inside of work. Okay, and some of us are there, some of us weren't. I do a podcast. You can look at it wherever you listen to podcasts. It's called the Now of Work podcast. And one of the things we talked about is that we hit a speed bump, and parts of our business took on water. Other parts of our business didn't take on water. And what's really important to keep in mind is look at those parts of our business that took on water, where we realize we've got some opportunities, and say, that's what we're going to talk about when we think about experience. So when we think about this concept of mindset, you need to go back and answer these questions. What matters now, right now, to the workforce? Not to HR, but to the workforce. Oh, someone just put my podcast link there. Thank you for that. What is high impact to your organization? What is high impact? What's going to add value? How do I make sure that I have a clear vision and strategy? And lastly, how do I get full commitment and acceptance to that change? This is the start, you guys. This is the start of what it takes to create an experience. This is what it takes to create an experience in this world we live in right now, which now we're calling the new now of work. Okay, I need to make sure I know what matters now to the workforce. Okay, now, I keep the word now. What matters now? Now, what are some outcomes? So this is one of those slides that, once again, I will go ahead and I'll paste my, I'll make sure my LinkedIn profile gets put up here so that you can follow up to get a copy of these. But this is one of those workshop slides that's so important to me. And why it's important to me is because what we want to do is we want to measure success. We want to say, what are our measures of success going to be? And if you think about that, here are some measures of success. Measures of success for associates, measures of success for business leaders, measures of success for the enterprise. When you think about that, these outcomes are the things that we shoot for. We don't, and this is part of that mindset part. We don't shoot for the go live. Go live should be called go begin. What we shoot for is to achieve these outcomes. Now, I love Ritesh's question. It like sparks me. So I'm going to answer it now instead of the Q&A. So if Yasmin gets mad at me, I apologize. Isn't it impossible to have a clear vision and strategy in these times? The answer to your question is yes, no. And don't laugh at me. It is impossible to have a clear vision that lasts longer than 3 months, that lasts longer than 6 months. But it's not impossible to have a clear vision for now. Okay, which means that we need to change our thinking. The concept of static strategy is over. It's going to be over for a long time, which means we need to think more agile. We need to plan and play both offense and defense and say, what are the things that we need to do to plan for the future? And what are the things that we need to do to keep the lights on? And that is hard work. It's hard work. This is the hardest work of our time. But I'll tell you that you will achieve your goals 100% more if you set up these outcomes. Okay, and then when I do workshops online for organizations, we build these specific outcomes for organizations with you guys. But this is just some. Okay. But your outcomes need to be yours. Like, don't copy these. You might say, well, they'll work for me. Some of them will work for you, but they need to be yours. This is your new now of work we're creating. So I'm going to ask you this polling question. I'm really interested about this. Does your organization today have the mindset to drive workforce experience success? So when I talk about mindset, it's measures of success, it's commitment, it's coordination, it's basically having leadership's buy-in, that what we want to do is focus on developing our experience. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the difference between a digital experience and a physical experience in a few minutes, and it's changed a lot in the last 10 weeks. But look at these results. They're fascinating to see these results come in. So mindset is key. Measures of success are key. The right operating model for HR is key. So, one big thing about mindset is, do you still have centers of excellence? And each one of those centers of excellence owns how they deliver their stuff. If they do, if that's the case, you don't have the right mindset. You've got work to do. So really quickly, just to share these results with you, it's a it's a great representation. We have 49% that say that they do have the mindset. We have 41% that say they're working on it, and we have 10% that say no. I should have just done yes, no, which would have been really interesting. But if you take a look at this, it's about 50-50. So the key here is making sure that you do this before you get too far down the technology path. Okay, making sure you do this before you get too far down the technology path. Now, why do I say that, you all? Going back to that other slide right here, right here. If you don't do the mindset piece, and you don't do the people piece, and you don't do the process and journey piece, and then you roll out your technology, and people say, this isn't any better than what we had before, or I really don't like this. What are they blaming? They're blaming the technology. And it's almost never the technology's fault. It's the fault that the business, in this case, HR and the business, didn't do the upfront work to make the technology successful. The business and the HR function didn't do the upfront work to make the technology successful. So when we think about that, let's talk about number 1 of 5. The work as we know it has changed forever. How has it changed forever? It's changed forever because it's redefining itself weekly. Okay, and this is not meant to give you a headache. This is meant to get your mindset focused that as this next normal comes into focus, which it's starting to, I have a much better focus today than I did 2 weeks ago, than I did 4 weeks ago, than I did 10 weeks ago. You know, we must use this opportunity to stop processes that don't add value now and truly focus on what we need to do going forward. Like, we in the HR profession and in the HR technology profession for the last 20 years have been saying, oh, we're going to get more strategic. Oh, we're going to focus on the workforce of the future. Oh, our focus is on future of work. Oh, we're going to focus on workforce 2020. And guess what? We've had a hard time getting there because of status quo, because of inertia, and because people haven't unlearned. But guess what? We just hit all of them in the head with this terrible thing called COVID. And because of that, what it's done is it's given us the opportunity to grab our future together and say, now's the time. If now is not the time, there's not going to be a time. If now's not the time, there's not going to be a time. So because work has changed, it's our time to go ahead and say, why are we doing this? Okay, so develop this true north. And here's, once again, from a workshop standpoint, you see some examples. So in the upper right of the screen, what you see is my vision. Okay, so I want my experience to be easy, empathetic, accessible, reliable, and evolving. And then as you see down at the bottom, I go into my attributes and I go into my measures. Okay, so when I think about that, what's my vision? What are my guiding principles? What are my attributes? And what are my measures? This, you guys, is the key to making sure that as you go through deployment, which by the way is different than implementation, as you go through deployment of mindset, journey, process, and people, and technology, that you have something that's your North Star. You keep pointing back to it. You keep checking on it, okay? Because if you don't do that, what you end up going live with is something completely different than what you actually started with, is a goal in mind. So that's number 1. Now, number 2, Renew said, please elaborate on the COEs not being relevant with the mindset change. We in HR have an operating model problem. The reason that we have an operating model problem is because in most HR organizations, we have these concepts called a COE. And while COEs are great, in COEs, most COEs own strategy, they own policy, and they own delivery. Strategy, policy, and delivery. But if every COE owns its own delivery, its own digital strategy, guess what? It's looked like a different experience. The talent acquisition experience, the learning experience, the performance experience, the portal experience, they're all going to look different. And guess what that does? That makes employees abandon, and it makes them call. Which means I never get to the digitization that I'm trying to get to. I don't do digital transformation. I just do technology transition. It's the same word, trans, but I'm moving from one technology to another instead of truly transforming how work gets done. So we have to quickly now, bring together all of these workforce facing efforts and shift from this siloed technology operating model to a model that's coordinated, okay? To a model that's coordinated. In my personal opinion, and through the work that we do with lots of organizations, the days of having an HR leadership team, then having someone that owns HR operations, which might be part of the leadership team, it might not be, and then someone owning HR technology are over. Those days are over. And if they're not over in your organization, end them now. It's time that we make HR a digital function. To do that, we can't have these groups all saying, well, HR is thinking this way, but they don't know how to make they don't understand technology. Digital doesn't mean technology. We need the whole HR function to be digitized now. And to do that, we have to change our operating model. So what does that look like? It means that I have a function called a VP of operations or a VP of employee experience that's responsible for that experience vision. It's responsible for the experience of how we interact with tools. It's responsible for the moments that matter. It's responsible for everything you see on this particular slide. But what I don't do is I don't let the recruiting people pick their technology and how they're going to implement it. I don't let the performance people pick their technology and how they're going to implement it. I don't let the knowledge content people and corporate comms people pick their technology and say how they're going to implement it. Because guess what? It's too much noise. It was fine when I just trained HR people how to use HR tools. But when all of a sudden I expect my employees to go on a journey that somehow makes sense, if I don't have one owner of that journey, the journey disconnects. Employees abandon. And they say, oh, this is just more HR stuff. We can't have that happen. That's not an experience. That's a painful set of processes. If we're truly thinking about experience, we have to put in place the operating model to be able to do that. So another quick question for you from a polling standpoint. Once again, can't wait to see these results. Let me get to that poll. Have you changed your operating model to be able to drive the experience mentality to the workforce? Once again, have you changed your operating model today to be able to make sure that you have that singular experience? Once again, it's a yes, it's a no, and it's a working on it. If I was a betting person, I'd say about 40% would be yes. That's about what we're seeing in organizations. And once again, because of the length of this session, I can't go into a ton of detail on some of these things, but I am happy to go into them more and follow up, in your sessions on them. So I'm going to end this poll just from an interest of time. Share the results. Ooh, interesting. 34% yes, 33% no, 33% working on it. So that's about 66% not quite there yet. So some work to do in this area. It's really hard. It's really hard to be successful with experience until you actually switch, get to this point. There's a great comment here from Sanjita that I'm going to get to in a second, but I want to make this point and then I'll get to this comment. Employee experience layer is a must now. It's not a nice to have. What does that mean? What's that concept of an employee experience layer? It's the place that a person goes to actually start their journey. Okay? It's more than a transaction. So when you think about this concept of these link farms, I call them link farms, people call them link farms, with just links to systems, links to old content, links to information that's not personalized to me, that stuff has to end. We have to get to a world where we optimize our intranets, our portals, and experience layers to this concept of the now of work. Okay, we cannot push transactions to people. We can't hope that people are going to go into HR tools going forward. So when you think about that, we have an experience layer, we have an interaction layer, and then we have a system of transaction layer. And once again, if you want these slides, drop me a LinkedIn, and I'll make sure you get them. But once again, forget the names of the vendors. This is actually some client work that from one of our clients. So forget the actual vendors' names here. But what's most important is you think about these layers. Okay, I need a layer that's going to be my experience layer, a layer for my interactions, a layer for my transactions. It's not one layer. Okay, it's not one layer. It never will be one layer. As much as everyone would love to say it's one layer, we're gonna get everything from one vendor. You might get everything from one vendor, but even if you do that, it's not one layer. So we have to take this experience layer seriously and take it now. Take it, grab it now. Intranet portal experience layer. Sangeetha said, this applies not only to HR COEs, but the whole org. CIO org must be sensitive to this and give an omni-channel experience. I completely agree, Sangeetha. The thing that we work with, and I'm going to launch this poll as I do this, is over and over again, people ask, where do we start? Okay, and when we think about where do we start, sometimes we start at the point where it's, let's just get HR right. And then there's other times where we say, you know what, we need to go full force enterprise. And that's really a question of what you can handle as an organization. Okay, it's really a question of what you can handle, but I completely agree. Ultimately, it's a full enterprise experience. So an employee doesn't know, oh, I need to go to the HR portal, or I need to go to the finance portal, and I need to go to the IT portal. So the poll that's up right now is, what grade would you give your experience layer? By the way, if you don't have a good experience layer, you don't have a good experience. Okay, so when you think about that, if you don't have if you don't have a great experience layer, you're not going to have a great experience. Okay, it's not like you can have a bunch of crap stuff on top and then have a great transactional system underneath and call that a good experience. So when you think about this, and I look at these results just really quickly, 15% said great, 44% said good, 32% said okay, 9% said not even okay. So when you think about this, this is an area, you guys, that in the new now of work, you have to jump on. I can't state this enough, because this is the lifeline. This is the IV that goes to the employee. Okay, that's going to drive all of that communication and experience going forward. Number 4 in the workshop, when we think about experience, we have to think about the moments that matter now. And I cannot state this emphatically enough. Our job right now is to enable experiences, communications, and capabilities that can drive the highest impact over the next 3 to 6 months. We've identified these things called moments that matter, like, hey, change your address, or I'm having a baby, or blah, 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 blah. That's not the stuff that matters now. What matters now is, am I communicating in a consistent way to my workforce? Am I listening to my workforce? Am I truly, truly, truly making sure that I need the human side of human resources to my people through digital mechanisms? Okay, if I build my pipe and I build how I communicate in that way, and I build that infrastructure, then as other moments come in, I can roll them out, I can deploy them. But if we just start with these things that we think matter to people, but they don't really matter to them, they're not going to use them. And at the end of the day, that's not an experience. It's not an experience. It's something that we in HR are pushing out to people because we think it's good. Along those same lines, when we think about our experience, we have to rid ourselves of this once a year stuff. We can't do once a year engagement surveys. We can't do once a year performance reviews. We can't do once a year, how are you feeling? We have to move to a real-time listening, monitoring, and action model to truly understand the workforce. A question that just came in, HR in real meaning will be lost if you're more digitized. That's not true. That's the problem. That comment is the problem. If all I do is roll stuff out digitized that doesn't matter, then we will lose all the human part of HR. If I actually talk about where humans and machines can meet to create a better future, I'm not losing anything. I'm not losing anything. If I roll something out that's once a year and have someone say, oh, you have to go do this, that's not human. If I'm rolling out a performance review once a year, that's not human. That's insane. It doesn't happen anymore. So we're doing a great job in HR of already taking the human out of human resources. Let's not blame digital. What we want to do is we want to think about how do we make us more human by leveraging digital thinking, by leveraging a mindset that focuses us on the things that really matter. Okay? We've wasted trillions of dollars in putting things out that are just talent management tools. And over time, what we have to do right now is think about where do we reinvent? Where do we reinvent? There's some brilliant questions coming in, and I'm going to get through a few slides here I want to show. How do we focus on people? Hopefully you guys are doing design thinking and persona work. Here's an example of persona. Okay, here's a person, a little about the person, their drivers, why do they come work here? What 1 year from now, where do they see themselves? What are the moments that they missed? How do they like to be communicated to? Guess what? If I design this way, I'm going to hit them right where they are. And that's going to drive an employee experience that they're going to understand. But if I just do a peanut butter spread and say, hey, I'm going to roll out the same experience to everything, guess what happens? I'm going to miss a whole group of people. So the concept of personas are key. And at the same time, the next thing is the concept of journeys. And how do I think about, here's an example of a pre-boarding journey. And notice at the top, as this builds, I'm actually measuring how people are feeling as they're going through the journey. What are the obstacles and what are the experiences? And guess what? This happens outside of HR all the time in the B2C world. We're actually measuring how people feel as they go through journeys. What we're moving to in HR is the B2Me world, B2Me, a personalized world where I want to think about how people are feeling as humans and how I'm empathizing with them as they're going through specific journeys. To do that, I need to understand their persona and I need to understand the journey that they're on. Number 5, digital workplace. The digital workplace is now a big part of HR's responsibility. What does this mean? In many organizations, HR was responsible for things like, okay, what are the cups that we're going to put in? Hey, what's the cafeteria going to have? Hey, how are people going to park when they get to work? But guess what? When it came to digital, IT did it. Today, we have one workplace. The question is, where are you taking part in work? Going forward, we're going to work in a distributed work model. The question is, where are you going to be? Are you going to be at a physical office that's owned by your company? Are you going to be at home? Are you going to be somewhere else? At the end of the day, we're building one workplace. Okay, and that if I do that, it's going to make distributed work that much easier. So this is a new mandate for HR. The world of HR technology is changing so fast. HR technology, just by the name of it, means technology for who? HR. HR people are the least of our concerns at this point when it comes to HR technology. We're talking about how do we enable people to do their best work in a distributed way wherever they are. And to do that, that needs to be part of our strategy. We have to do that. And think through this concept of what's most important from a business value standpoint and what's most important from an urgency standpoint. If I blend those two together, I'm truly in a position to be able to take advantage of that. So really quickly, just from a time standpoint, and I know that Yasmin's about to kick me off, so I need to get to some of the Q&A. Our mindset needs to be created. Our journeys and people need to be understood. Our processes need to be reimagined. And lastly, the technology is the fuel that allows that to happen. But nothing is going to change unless you change. Okay? Nothing is going to change unless you change. It's not going to be your CEO that says you need to change. It's not. It's not going to be your CIO that says HR needs to change. It's going to be you in HR, you and the HR technology people that are going to be drivers of that. So once again, I hope this slide deck was helpful. I just pasted my LinkedIn contact there again. Connect with me. I'm happy to send the slide deck to you if you want it. And Yasmin, I have a few minutes for questions. Do you want me to just go ahead and take some, or do you have some that you already spotted there?
Well, you can go ahead. You see questions that you can see as well. I think a lot of the questions are coming up to becoming, how do you enable human touch along with digital touch? So if you could probably, respond to that, Jason.
Yeah, so human touch and digital touch, one of the things that's so important to you guys is to realize there's two types of touching. I know that sounds weird. There's high touch human and there's high touch digital. High touch human and high touch digital. And what you want to think about are the capabilities you're trying to deliver, and which of them do you want to deliver in a high touch human way, and which of them do you want to deliver in a high touch digital way. So very, very important to think about. The other thing I didn't tell you guys is that if you ever want me to deliver this presentation to your leadership team, I'm happy to do it. Free, whatever time of the day or night, because if you get this right, no matter what you do with technology, you're going to be better off. Another question here, Yasmin, that came in. I believe that the most important is to integrate various tools used by employees and give them a unified experience. I love that comment. And guys, that's called a journey. What you just said is called a journey. To take a bunch of tools, unify them together in a way where the employee doesn't even know what tool they're using. The employee doesn't even know what tool they're using. They just know they're part of a journey. Okay, that's the world that we live in right now, is to be able to do that. Another question, could you please share some interventions which can be done on a continuous basis? So an example of an intervention done on a continuous basis is if I ask you all right now, are you green, yellow, or red on a stoplight? I learned this from the amazing People Matters team. Are you green, yellow, or red? How do you feel? Green, you feel great. Yellow, you feel red, not so good. Type it in the chat. How do you feel? Green, yellow, red. Okay, I see a lot of greens, but I see Vanita is yellow. Okay, here's a continuous improvement. Vanita or Sunil, what could I do to make you feel green today? Look what I just did with data. I actually did something with data. Another thing you do from a continuous improvement standpoint, you look at the searches that came up from a portal standpoint. You realize that 82 people searched for something and I couldn't find what they were looking for. Guess what? Talk about continuous improvement. Put something in there and so that they find it tomorrow, because they're going to search again. So those are two out of many. I guess I'll just leave you with this one comment on that. You need to treat experience like a pet, not like a rock. Okay? A rock, you put it in, you let it sit there for 24 months, and then you say, oh, it must be time to do something again. When we think about a pet, I need to walk it, water it, take care of it every day. I'm getting kicked off stage, so I'm done. I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys so much for your time, and we will, it's the now of work. It's our opportunity. Let's take advantage of it.
Wow. All right. Thank you. That was so fantastic, Jason. You've been as awesome as always. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, can we hear it once again for Jason with the reactions in the chat box? Just keep saying cheers, great, whatever you can to appreciate this great man here. And now it is time for the final session of the day, the closing note on the topic, happily but not ever after. This powerhouse keynote would be presented by none other than Devdutt Patnaik, mythologist, author, speaker, illustrator, which will be followed by a curated Q&A with Esther Martinez, CEO and Editor-in-Chief of People Matters. Keep your fingers steady on the chat box to ask your questions. and join us now for the next session. See you all there. And thank you once again, everyone. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.